So first off, Alex, I want to say congratulations on
Thank
your
you.
206.7 bushel soybean. That's an outstanding record for soybean yield. And, I myself, I'm somewhat of a connoisseur, and I'm really interested in high yielding corn and soybean. And I think what you've done really speaks to the power of agronomic management. You have access to the same varieties as everybody else. There's a lot of growers in your area that have dealt with a similar environment as you this year. But what you did differently was through agronomic management, you drove the yield. You really got the most out of the yield potential of that variety. And I think a lot of that really falls into adequate nutrition.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. So, we were talking about, where does yield come from, the components of yield. What we really tend to focus on, most guys, and this is the easier component, is pod number or seed number. We're always about planting earlier, planting a longer maturity variety, trying to maximize that growing season so that we can drive a higher node number on the plant, more points of attachment for pods. And you've done that. You drove pod number, and you focused on some nutritionals to mitigate stress during bloom, to retain blooms, retain pods. But what you've done differently is, when we tend to drive pod number, seed number, there's an inverse relationship with seed weight. If I have more pods, more seeds, I have less resources to move into those seeds. But you almost did the exact opposite of that. You had a high pod number and a very high seed weight. I did some back calculation. On average, we get about 3,000 soybean seeds per pound. What you achieved was 1,650 seeds per pound, almost double the seed weight of an average yield. And a lot of that comes, by looking beyond that R3 growth stage. We don't think about managing the soybean plant past that. So can you speak a little bit about, what did you do, day to day, week to week, to really focus in on that seed weight factor?
Yeah, like I was saying earlier, we tissue sample once a week from V1 all the way up until I'm desiccating those beans for harvest. Every 7 days we're pulling that tissue sample. And what we're doing there, we're building a trend line. And I want to see that trend line, if it's going where we want it to, if it's staying where we need it, or if it's going down. If it's going down 2 weeks in a row, we're thinking about making an application of whatever that may be, boron, manganese, iron, whatever it is. And two, a lot of people don't even fertilize soybeans. The ones that do, they're putting out a pre-plant fertilizer and calling it good. But soybean plant takes up about 67% of its nutrients after R1.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense, in my opinion, to you definitely need a base fertilizer out, but don't stop. Anyone that's fertilizing, they're putting it out pre-plant. They're not really doing anything past R1. They may spray a fungicide and an insecticide and call it good around R2, but R1 is when we really amped up our foliar feed and our Y drop, our injection, everything. So when most were giving up on the stage they're giving up on a soybean, that's when we were just really amping up our fertility program and foliar fed program too.
Yeah, and when we compare soybean to corn, we think of corn, that critical stage being right around flowering, that tassel stage. Yep. That critical stage in soybean, that's R3, R4. That's when nutrient demand, water demand is. It's
also at seed size. That's when you can really enhance it if it's going up or down.
Yeah, absolutely. You're talking about using foliar nutrition, and one element that comes to mind that can both impact seed number, pod number, and seed weight would be boron. And you were using BRANDT Smart KB.
Yep, we used Smart B and Smart BMO through vegetative stage and at planting. And then starting at R1, we swapped to the KB for the potassium acetate and the boron. And we used that heavily. That was a huge factor in the seed size, without a doubt in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, when we're looking at, foliar potassium, foliar boron, the amount of potassium we're putting on through that product really isn't a drop in the bucket of the total potassium requirement of the crop. But what it's helping it do is overcome transient deficiencies during periods of peak uptake. And, we just can't pull that K in through the roots quick enough.
Bridging a gap.
Exactly, yeah. And potassium and boron both, they help facilitate the movement of sugars in the plant. You're talking there in Georgia, you got this longer growing season. You're harvesting sunlight over a longer period than in most areas. But once we've created those sugars through photosynthesis, those photoassimilants need to move into your sink tissues, which are those developing pods. And potassium and boron both help the movement of sugars in the plant.
And when we were spraying at Smart B, Smart BMO, Smart KB, we were actually adding sugar in with those as well.
Yeah, yeah. Let's go back a little bit earlier in that season. You're talking about making herbicide applications, trying to mitigate stress. What are things that we can do to help improve pod number, pod retention? And there's some elements that we can really look at through Smart Trio. Zinc helps with flower retention. Boron is really important for reproductive growth. We see higher pod numbers when we're using boron. And then manganese is another element that helps metabolize foreign compounds like herbicides when we're making those applications.
Yep, absolutely. And you mentioned the Smart Trio. That's one of the main products that I use during my herbicide application period. I spray 2 post-applied herbicides, and we're putting Smart Trio and Smart BMO in with those to help mitigate that stress.
Yeah.
Whether it's right before or right after, it's farming. I mean, timing's it's hard sometimes to do it exactly how you want, but ideally we do it right before our herbicide pass, and it helps mitigate that stress and break all that down a lot better on the plant.
Yeah. So to me, it kind of sounds like if you're gonna, get into this realm of using foliar nutrition in soybean for higher yields, I think there's really 2 periods to really focus on, and that's that vegetative stage that maybe you've started R1, R2, trying to mitigate stresses at that point, and then things that you can do later in the season to help move nutrition into those developing pods.
Yep. And that's where your bigger seed size comes to, and then early on as well, because that helps. When we're stacking those nodes on, that's when we're determining how many clusters we're putting on of those soybeans. So we don't want to be lacking for anything at that point. Yeah. And in my area, and I can't really speak for anywhere else, I'd assume it would be about the same. I'm adding a node every 5 days, and these foliars are lasting in my opinion, 7 to 10 days. So if I'm over 10 days without an application, there's a node there that's it could be lacking for something.
Yeah.
I don't want to stretch on high yield bean environment. I don't want to stretch past 10 days, preferably 7 days.
Well, I saw some pictures of those pod clusters you had, especially up at those upper nodes, and I fully believe that soybean crop never had a bad day. It never wanted for nothing.
It didn't have a bad day fertility-wise. It had a couple hammering rains on it, but other than that, it was a good growing season. And like I said, we didn't let it want for anything food-wise.
Yeah, the environment, most of the environment's out of our control, but that fertility aspect, that can be in the grower's control.
Absolutely, and it's something that does need to be controlled.
Yep.